Hey everybody,
Go.
welcome to the Organic Takeover. Coming live a little bit early, but really excited this week. Have Joushua Steensland on. Josh is, as far as my journey in organics, man, Josh is the one that really spurred me on to, I guess, like you've said before, trust the system and see that it can work. So, man, I definitely, I guess I'll give you a little second to introduce yourself. Um,
Cool,
sorry.
man. No, it's all good. That was sounded like a little feedback or something. But no, I appreciate it. Like we were talking before we went live, I can't believe it's been 3 years since the no-till, since I did the no-till talks. And so I guess for anybody that's not super familiar, I basically have been cultivating cannabis since around 97 is when I started to take it really serious. I just gotten out of the Marine Corps and wanted to grow weed. And so I was smoking a lot and it just made sense to start growing it. And so, I've been on that journey ever since. And about 4.5 years ago, I had a kind of an epiphany, that was forced out of circumstance where I was using, your typical kind of name brand hydro shot, whatever the new hottest flavor of the month bullcrap is. And I was using that, and I had been using it for, I don't even want to give them any recognition at all, even bad recognition. But it's just all bad. So I had a bad batch come in. Things were weird, and it was one of those stupid like pH perfect type formula things where it's just really like, even back then I was wanting to find a way to separate myself from the equation, so I was choosing like the pH perfect formula stuff, and it just didn't work out. It wasn't working out. I was never fully happy, and I'm still never fully happy, but it was on another level of unhappiness with the finished product. I just knew that there could be something better, and I started just researching the ICMAG forums, and then came across Subcool's Super Soil, and that was like the first time where I was like, oh shit, you don't have to pH your water with this system, and you don't have to really check your parts per million. And that really rocked me because I was coming off of doing the current culture system, which was that super oxygenated deep water culture, really small margin of error in those systems, especially if you're using any kind of biological like spinosad, which is bad, we know now, but at the time that was a viable option. And if you get any of that in your system, into those deep water culture systems, it just creates a biofilm you can almost never get rid of. I mean, it's really insane. So anyway, I was coming off of that deep water culture, and the idea of not having to pH my water or worry about parts per million was really intriguing. So I went ahead and put together a batch of super soil that was Subcool's recipe, and cooked it and did everything that you're supposed to do and did a run. And I think that that's even documented on my YouTube channel. It's some of the first videos, and they're just like little 5 or 7 gallon smart pots that I'm actually using in the skeleton of the old deep water culture system as kind of like a drain to waste type situation.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, and I loved it, and I loved how it worked so much that I really just, like, I was starting to look up online more and more. And then I found on the forums somebody had posted a picture, and I wish I could remember who it was, because this is the guy. Whoever posted this picture was the one that sent me down the living soil rabbit hole. And it was just this picture of this most beautiful plant, like 7 weeks in flower, absolutely gorgeous. And he was like, this plant, the only thing this plant ever received was fresh water and its own leaves, its own shade leaves. And I was just mind blown. So when I saw that, I was like, no fucking way. I was just like, no way. It didn't compute. And so I started really diving into the living soil situation. And that's where Build a Soil site was really kind of integral at that time. They still do, and back then had a lot of information on, you know, the living soil or no-till kind of methodology. So I got to give Jeremy and those guys the props they deserve, you know, for being really at the forefront, and giving people like me who's been able to create a voice. You know, if it wasn't for them, it would have taken me way longer to kind of reinvent this wheel. So Build a Soil was a huge factor in my success, with giving me just stuff to chew on, and then I could go on and do my own research. So I quickly moved from that super soil situation. I only did one cycle, and then I immediately went straight to living soil beds. And ever since then, it's been no turning back.
Now, did you use the super soil for the beds, or what soil did you start with in the beds?
Yeah, so no, I didn't. You know, after researching, I realized that there was a lot of kind of like redundancies in that super soil mix. There was a lot of stuff in there that was unnecessarily hot. I didn't have any burning issues or anything. I just wanted to, when I transitioned to this living soil, I wanted to start with a true clean slate. So I ended up using that bed, that stuff in my outdoor kind of raised bed. So I just carted all that soil and deposited into my beds. And subsequently that year, we had just an insane tomato harvest. It was ridiculous. So we used that super soil in the garden, and it just rocked it. And then I ended up going with the Tad's Keep It Simple water only mix with the biochar from up here in Washington. And so it's been his soil or Build a Soil soils, the only stuff that I've ever bought that was kind of a pre-mix, you know, specifically designed for living soil situations. And both companies are just really like, I recommend them equally. I've had equal results with both of them. They both really know what they're doing, and they're kind of tried and true in the industry. So I hold them at kind of an equal weight when it comes to quality.
Yeah, I would agree too, man. Even in sharing knowledge, Tad's awesome with that as well.
Agreed.
Uh,
Yep.
I love his podcast. So, um, you know, just to get down to kind of the nuts and bolts of some of the stuff, when you were doing your no-till talks, I mean, initially we're talking like water only, and since then, I mean, you've gone through some, I mean, a lot of different stuff, even working in commercial to big fields, but
Yep.
I know you just recently took Dr. Elaine Ingham's course on soil biology and getting an understanding of that. So I'm really curious how that has really shifted your thinking from when you were doing the no-till talks.
Sure. You know, to be honest with you, I really felt like that the experience of going through Dr. Lane's course and kind of absorbing all that knowledge really confirmed the what I was trusting before, in the water only kind of mentality. And that's one thing that I wanted to kind of maybe make a point of clarity, because it has been a source of confusion for some people over the years that I've had to address from time to time. But you know, just for those that don't know, what I mean by water only is water only in the beds once the plants are planted. The only thing I up to this point, and I'm still going to be this way, the only thing that I will apply to my beds is just straight water through the Blue Mat drip system, or if I top water a little bit, just because the surface looks like it might be dry in a spot, or occasionally I'll do that, just fresh water. In between the cycles, before I took Dr. Elaine's course and I had no microscopy skills, I would just kind of like, once or twice a year, apply compost or apply fresh earthworm castings. And that's how I would kind of rejuvenate the biology in the beds. Very simple. Like I said, very Fukuoka-esque. Was really not trying to be all up in the shit, you know, like those first few cycles. And what was the inspiration for the no-till talks was really to prove the point that you can be absent to a certain degree. And I know that there's the whole farmer's shadow aspect of successful farming and successful gardening, but there's also, there's two sides to that coin. There's also a time as the farmer when you need to understand when your shadow is not necessary. So if we tend to want to overlove and be over involved, and especially cannabis production is very alpha type, A type personalities, who like to be in control, who not in any kind of weird malicious thing, but it feels good to have this. I was there, like I used the 7-part nutrient formulas and felt like a mad scientist, and like bam bam bam, and grew weed that was okay and felt okay about it. um, but when I took myself out of the equation and understood that there is a deeper connection between the plant and the soil and the biology, and that takes place independent of our involvement if we just put the pieces together. So I wanted to really illustrate the point that you can just, if you set the framework up right, if you set the foundation up, you don't have to toil in your garden. You don't have to, more times than not, that extra time you're spending in your garden is creating potential negative variables. So if you can figure out a formula that produces outstanding quality with minimal time and effort, that was something that I wanted to show and prove that could be done. And so the soil food web course really kind of solidified that for me with the science aspect of it, because now I still feel the same about the water only. So I'm still only going to apply water once plants are in the ground, water only. After I harvest, I'll do a soil analysis, look where my bacteria and fungi are, see how my nematode counts are. If I need to do any adjustments, then I'll do an extraction or whatever, and then I'll address that at that time before I retransplant my new stuff in. And so that's what I mean by water only, is water only during the cultivation cycle. In between cycles, if I need to add biology, I'll add biology. And I will do foliar feeds during I don't like to call them foliar feeds. They're really more exudate stimulation, really. So like I'll do like a very light, like a homeopathic dose of kelp as a foliar, just to kind of give those exudes a little more oomph.
It's a biostimulant, right?
Yeah, totally, right. Then I'll do that, and I'll do aloe. Sometimes I'll do them independently. Sometimes I'll combine them. And I have been using a little bit this time, as my first cycle ever, has been using a little bit of humic as a foliar. And I know some people are like, humic's supposed to go into the ground, but there's still trace, and there's still stuff there, and I'm just kind of going off an intuition, and just once again using very, very small, like homeopathic type doses when I do the foliar. But that's, to me, the water only principle is still really important. And as long as people understand that I don't mean water only always, or that, all I'm using is tap water and I'm never paying attention to biology or anything like obviously it goes without saying that you're observing. And that's the thing about the Fukuoka approach that really resonated with me, is that you're not doing nothing, you're observing. And sometimes just because there's lack of physical motion involved doesn't mean that you're disconnected from the grow. So if you're observing what's going on, sometimes that observation, it can have way more of a profound effect over time than whatever physical manipulation you're going to do with your space. So it's just one of those things that I think that soil food web course really solidified, that trust the process mentality for me moving forward.
Yeah, no doubt. Um, Now, when you trying to think of how I want to word this, but my question that I'm really curious about too is like, we always think in terms of NPK. I mean, even the whole super soil idea, or of
Sure.
regular top dressings, and
Yep.
compost tea or regular feeding teas even. But how are you planning on getting enough nitrogen in the system? Because that seems to be the biggest hurdle for organics is like, what's your source of nitrogen going in, and how is it going to be sustainable for the plant, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it's a good segue off because that is one of the things that I'm going to be changing moving forward, and I'm going to document it, and I'm going to just kind of take this journey with everybody, take everybody along with me as I do this. But the one thing that I did learn from Dr. Elaine's school, which I think is the hardest thing for people to wrap their heads around and to really trust, you know, and without, when I'm going through the foundation courses, like she shows case study after case study and data to back up these claims. So it's not just, you know, kind of bro science or a wing nut person saying just any old crazy thing. Like this is backed by science, and still people have a really hard time understanding this. And what this is that there is enough NPK and trace mineral in the parent material, which is the sand, silt, and clay that make up your soil. Now, whether your soil is clay or sandy or loamy or sandy loam or whatever, it doesn't matter. What's in that sand, silt, and clay, if it's unlocked by biology, there's enough NPK to grow any plant whatsoever. They're like she puts it, there's nobody going and top dressing the forests, the old growth forests. There's nobody going out there and top dressing the jungles. These plants are growing from the parent material in these soils. And it doesn't matter if you're in sand, doesn't matter if you're in clay. Of course, you have to deal with your soil conditions and water penetration and all those kind of things. But the biology present, if in the appropriate numbers, will unlock the NPK and the trace that's in that grain of sand, that's in the rock, that's in the little chunks of stuff that's on the organic matter that comprises the organic matter. So that's the thing that people need to, that have the toughest time when I'm talking to people about, hey, look, when I'm going to go forward on my beds, I'm not going to top dress anymore. I'm not getting the nutrient impacts or anything. I'm going to top dress with a biocomplete compost. So not a compost that's just full of bacteria, but a compost that has the bacteria, the fungi, the nematodes, the protozoa, everything necessary for a complete soil food web, on top of the organic matter that's going to contribute to the humus layer. It's going to add the carbon to the soil that you know is going to keep it viable. It's going to keep them with stuff to work on. So that's the whole thing with fertility through biology, is that the fertility is there in the parent material. It just needs to be accessed through biology. And so I'm looking forward to moving forward in my beds with this mindset, and then on all of my projects outside of this, from the very largest of scale to my little 3 beds in my garage, I'm moving forward with this same mentality. That's how much confidence I have in the information that I learned, and how it just rang and resonated as true, on top of, you know, just the case studies and the data to show, you know, she showed a chemical analysis of a grain of sand, and, you know, how many units of nitrogen are available in there compared to how many units of nitrogen corn needs, you know, a very nitrogen hungry plant. And it doesn't even, you know, it didn't even come close to what was available, you know, what could be taken from that grain of sand. So, you know, seeing that data was just really, and then seeing the case studies, like showing, she would show the farms, like this is the way it was before I got here. This is what it was like a year later. This is what it's like now. It's 5 years later, you know, and it's just case study after case study after case study. And it's really hard to deny that. in my mind.
No, definitely. And I mean, I'm amazed. Like, I guess I'd give Dr. Elaine a shout out because I know that was a lot of years of hard work, and she
Yeah,
kind of battled upstream
yeah,
with some counter information of what was
yeah.
normally thought out there. So,
Yeah, well, there's stories of her. Like I've heard stories from people in the conventional ag world, because from my kind of hemp adventures the past couple years, I've had a chance to rub elbows with some guys who, you know, 5 years ago would have been more than happy to see us weed growers go to jail. But now these guys are growing hemp, and we're, and so we're showing up at the same kind of talks and conferences or whatever. And oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. I hate it when I do that.
Dr.
Oh
Elaine,
yeah. So this guy was talking about, because I was mentioning Dr. Elaine, and he was mentioning that she had showed up to this big, huge conventional ag conference to do a talk. And there was like huge John Deere representatives and distributors and all these, and she gets in there and talks about how you're never going to need to farm with tractors again, and people were just getting up and leaving in droves, and so she's not afraid to, stare down the barrel of that gun and just shoot it straight, man. Like she will walk into the lion's den and just tell it like it is, man. She's unapologetic, and that's what I love about it.
yeah, and it's all based out of reality too, and
Right.
that's the part that a lot of people don't get. Like, I mean, she's actually quantifying the things
Yeah.
she's talking about. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it's
absolutely.
really a lot of work that goes into even doing that. Like those
Totally.
papers, we can read a paper in what, a 45 minutes maybe, and whatever, what I mean. But it took a year or 2 years to actually
Yep.
make that actually happen, and
Yep.
that's something we often take for granted for sure. Because
Yeah, exactly. She's been boots on the ground for a really long time, and I think I just want to address one other thing that I hear sometimes in the community about her and the soil food web kind of um, movement, is that it's like, oh, well, she's never even grown cannabis, so what does she know? And I'm like, well, you're missing the point. There's a greater point. She's saying that all plants benefit from this, and cannabis is included in that. So she doesn't have to have any specific cannabis experience for this knowledge to be useful in the cannabis industry. And I think a lot of folks are just kind of missing the point, on what she's trying to bring to the table.
I have no doubt she would grow fire as cannabis if she put her
Yeah,
mind to it.
yeah,
So
no kidding.
yeah, and just kind of back to the whole like nutrients in a grain of sand, Josh. So
Hmm.
so you're firing up your bed, and I know you were kind of away and things went dormant and
Yep.
all that. So like what can somebody at home, I mean, we're all kind of trying to emulate this, right? So we want to
Sure.
try to take these steps to release that nutrient. Like what would you suggest for somebody that's listening to first steps to go towards?
Sure. So I mean, to maintain the kind of fertility through biology.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, you can learn how to make the biocomplete compost, which there's plenty of resources out there that have that information. um, you don't necessarily need a microscope, and that's the other thing. Like you don't have to have a scope. I mean, I successfully cultivated no-till without a microscope for several years, and would be very confident moving forward without one. As long as you put together the components in the correct fashion, and you make the cake, or you do the recipe like you're supposed to. Odds are you're going to be fine, and you're not going to have an overabundance of anaerobes or whatever. As long as what you're putting on your bed doesn't smell like sewage, odds are you're going to be okay. Could there be a little bit of bad guys in there? Yeah, but they're probably going to be outcompeted by the good guys. So this idea that you have to have a microscope to implement fertility through biology is a misnomer. It's not at all true. um, we don't have to learn how we don't have to know how our engines run in our cars to operate them. We just know we got to put oil here and gas here, and if the check engine light, you take it to somebody who does know. And
Right.
so It's one of those kind of things where you're just trusting the process works. So biology is important. So if you can't do a compost pile, or you find that difficult, some people, it just might be difficult for them to source the materials, or to go through the process, or to wait the appropriate amount of time, and all that. It might seem daunting. So the next best thing, or equal, is a vermicomposting. So if you can set aside in your space a tub or something where you can start vermicomposting, and then you can take some of your leafy material from your companion plants in your bed, and you feed them into your worms. And so now you're nutrient cycling, you're cycling material from your bed that got locked up into the leafy greens of your companion plants, and now it's coming back. And then fresh earthworm castings are an awesome source of fungi, bacteria, nematodes. So, that's a really good way to keep your microbial population fresh without having to go through the rigors of doing some biocomplete compost. So in that instance, you can get like a bagged high quality compost, especially if it's a little home grow, like a Malibu or something, which is good, but it's not as good as if you got the Malibu compost fresh at the site. And they would be the first ones to admit, once you bag it and package it, there's going to be some loss, and it's going to be kind of less than. It's not meant to be a slight towards Malibu. I love them. I love what they do. It's just kind of the fact of the matter. But you can get a high quality compost like Malibu, and then add to it with the vermicompost. So now you are bringing a lot of that organic material, organic matter back into your beds, and contributing to the humus layer building. And the biology can come from your vermicompost, which is a really, really great source of good biology.
Yeah, and I noticed in your videos too, with firing up the bed, it seemed like a forest grew out of those beds in like 2 weeks. That thing was like full of that. And I guess me personally, like when I do my own, I started off with a 12 blend cover crop from Build a Soil. And there's some certain hurdles that come along with that. One was it attracted some bugs and some different things. Like, how important is the companion planting and cover cropping to maintaining all that biology?
I think it's really important, and for a couple reasons. But the main one is that you've got each one of these companion plants interacting with the soil in their own way. They're depositing their own exudates that they need, and they're attracting their own specific bacteria, waking up bacteria that will only want the exudes that they're producing. So if you've got 30 different types of living companion plants going on, you've got kind of a symphony of exudes happening. So the availability of diverse microbiology is a lot greater in a system that's got the companion plants that are actively exchanging and doing their deals with the soil biology, than as if you had just kind of like straw and maintaining moisture, right? So in my mind, it's worth dealing with, and that's another reason why, I don't like a kind of monoculture approach when it comes to your companion plants. So I'm not a fan of just clover or just ryegrass, because then you definitely are going to attract a pest that's particular to clover, thrips or something. Like you're just going to have, you're inviting potential problems. So once again, if you have a diverse companion plant situation, then the odds of you having, a big signal of, one type of plant that might attract a predator that you've got, or a prey type, destructive insect like thrips or something, I think you can kind of mitigate that, because you've got all these different varying signals. That might be kind of a hogwash when you look into science. But that's my gut when I go about it, is that, if it's not all strawberries, then, I'm not going to attract the things that just want to eat the strawberries or whatever. So,
No, that makes sense.
yeah,
And that was
yeah.
part of my problem too. I ran into as I've switched over to clover because I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
they're these nitrogen fixing
Sure.
things. And that's and that's a basic understanding of some of how those interactions happen. But I love the way you
Mhm.
put that, where it's attracting all these different biologies that
Mhm.
plant specifically wants, and
Right.
it's all about increasing that diversity. And I've actually kind of gone back to doing a cover crop just because of the realization that the amount of exudates that go out into the soil through all those companion plants,
Yep.
there's no way I could add that, like sugar wise or
Sure.
enzyme or any of that stuff, like teas or anything. I can't compete with what those can actually generate. So that is pretty.
100%. What in each one of those plants is formulating very specific exudate concoctions, and they're waking up and attracting and multiplying very specific bacterial species. And so, it really is kind of this as above, so below type of thing. So when I see wild successful diversity in my beds or in my grow spaces or on the acreage or wherever we're at, then that's the indicator to me that what's happening below is healthy and good and diverse. And I do pay attention, like sometimes, especially during flower, you'll get the upper canopy of the cannabis, and it creates a diffused light situation. So you get die off, and so some plants just don't make it and don't come back. And so there's this whole kind of um,
Like a balance or something.
yeah, this balance thing that's taken place where, a comfrey just for whatever reason just got too choked out and didn't make it, or a comfrey leaf laid over a bunch of other things that smothered them all out. The comfrey died, and now I've got a bare spot there. So sometimes I'll reseed those bare spots with just kind of stuff that I have in my seed vault. I had some seeds spill in there, so I had like a 1/4 inch mix of just random crap. I could identify some of it I couldn't. So I just started throwing that into my beds to fill the spots. And so that's how I started getting like beets and all kinds of stuff, because I was just like, yeah, whatever. Wasn't uptight. Like if mustard popped up, I would pull it, or if there was one little broccoli plant that made it, I wasn't overly worried about that one brassica inhibiting the mycorrhiza fungal, because it was one. Once again, diversity kind of helps keep the balance. So if you've got something that's not playing nice, it's just one little kind of micro pocket, and the system will even itself out over time.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Um, so it is in the organic matter then that the biology is really working, not necessarily in the, like you mentioned sand, silt, and clay, but then when you talk, you were like, well, I'm adding this organic matter back, and I'm just kind of curious, like, if
Sure.
all the stuff's in the sand, silt, and clay, then what are we really trying to do with the
The the organic matter, from my perspective, is creating the texture.
okay?
Right. So if your sand, silt, and clay balance is kind of one layer of texture, right? And that's your parent material. So if you've got, you know, um, more silt and clay, then obviously, you're going to need a whole lot more organic matter to kind of fluff that up and allow water to penetrate, because the clay is going to be very, very dense. And then on the other side, if you've got sandy soil, you need that organic matter to kind of slow the water down in there. So just the organic matter helps add structure. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at. And is there NPK in that organic matter? Sure, there is. You bet. But there's also NPK in that parent material as well.
Because that's kind of what I was wondering. Like there's that law of return, right? If we're harvesting this big bush off the bed, then we got to put something back from the stuff it took to build that. And
Yeah, I mean, I think the common thought, and we're not wrong. We're not wrong in thinking that the plant is taking from the soil. It is, and it is taking from that parent material. But from Dr. Lane's data, and if I'm going to be a steadfast soil food web purist, then the thought process is there's enough NPK in that parent material for decades and decades and decades. And I think it was even like hundreds of years, right? So there's enough NPK there as long as the biology is there. There you're gonna be fine, right? And that's where people don't have the trust, because modern ag and chemical fertility kind of thinking is that they take all these soil tests and they've got these kind of arbitrary levels where, like, oh shoot, you're short in whatever, your crop's gonna fail because it needs this level of whatever. And so I think that we and it's been proven through case studies and time again that all you do need is the biology to just access that, and that there's such a huge well of nutrition available in the parent material that we really don't even understand it. And that's the other thing that one of the analogies that kind of came to me when I was thinking about just how little food the plant actually needs to consume. So like when we think of a plant that's hungry, like corn, and we can only think of consuming things as in the terms of how we consume things as a human. But the plants, they're consuming things at such a small level. I mean, it would literally be like I thought of it instantly when I learned how, kind of like how little they actually need to perform their function. It's like if we could smell a steak or smell food, and then get nutritionally satisfied from that. It's literally like they're taking such small amounts of this material to perform their function that it's really hard to fathom. It's hard to wrap our human minds around it, because um, we're so used to consuming things how we consume it. So it's such a small amount, and so that helped me understand just really how deep that fertility well is in parent material, in properly built and cultivated soils. That the plants really just, they don't need food like we think they need it.
and
If
that
that makes sense, yeah.
No, it definitely makes sense, man. Just because, like, from my personal experience, like, just growing, I'm fifth cycle on some soil right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I have pulled it, tore it down, re-amended, done a bunch of different
Yep.
stuff, but the parent material is still the same on some of
Right.
those. And um, the one thing I've noticed is that, like, ever since I've started my whole journey, everything I've done has been dialing back. Like, my top dressings have got less. They got
Yep.
less. Every time I learned something new, it got less. And
Yeah.
it was just kind of blows my mind because it falls in line with where you're at, where you're like, dude, I'm just trusting what the fuck's going on, man. Like, you don't always got to have your fingers in the pot, and
Right.
that's something I'm learning slowly, and it's interesting. So it totally does make sense. But
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was a hard one for me because I was so um I was spending so much time in the grow, and I felt like that the time you were spending in the grow was somehow a measure of your potential success. And it's really was the inverse. Like it was when I started to be able to just like walk through the grow for 5 minutes and just kind of look and like, yep, things look like a good, there's no water puddled anywhere, there's no dry beds, like everything's good, cool, I'm out. And or I'd go on a 2-week vacation and not check cameras and not nothing, just come back and be like, oh my gosh, things look awesome. Like to be able to do that and have complete trust, like my anxiety levels about cultivation went down. Like it became a thing that was a stressful chore to a thing that was literally therapeutic, with just that simple mindset of, like letting go and stepping back and trusting that you have the components together and trusting that you will observe something if it's going wrong and take the appropriate measures to rectify that, and so that was another good thing, like coming from a deep water culture situation where you have hours to remedy an issue, because everything is so, the growth is so accelerated. It's hard to beat vegetative growth in a deep water culture system. I've never seen anything like it, but that fast, rapid metabolic rate and everything comes, like at a price. Like if the wheel's off balance and you're going 100 miles an hour, it doesn't take very many seconds before you're done. But if you're going 2 miles an hour, you got a lot of time to deal with that wobble and right things. So soil really gave put me in slow-mo mode, which was great, because the coming from the deep water culture where you're just like on it, on it, on it, and to be able to be like, oh shit, okay, so I could really just chill the fuck out and like let this shit happen, And so what really helped with me was like with my very first cycle in the no-till beds, um, the product from that, I created bubble hash at home and won the dope cup in Oregon with it in 16. And then that was the huge eye opener for me. Like I knew that product was special. It had the terpene profile and a sugar coating like I've never seen previously. And I'd been cultivating since 97, so it was without question, hands down, the best product I had grown to date, and to get confirmation from others that, at least that the hash that was made from it was super high quality I was sold at that point, it was, and then every successive cycle since then, I've been, impressed with the ease at which you can produce really high quality stuff, that actually meets my standards, which are ridiculously high. Like I drive my wife nuts because I get sick of even like the most fire shit I ever grew is that Trilotto from last year, which I'm going to be testing again, and we're going to be hopefully I'm trying to convince the breeder to like make the seeds public, man. He's been working on them for so long. He's a really good friend of mine. But even that stuff, like, you get to a point where like 3-4 weeks been smoking the same shit, I'm just over it, so I've got a really high standard and a low tolerance for bullshit. And so when I'm happy with product at the end, it really says something about the method.
Oh, that's cool. Stepping back a little bit, you were mentioning, so in hydro you can make, you have to make these quick adjustments and whatever.
Sure.
So in this style, I mean, if I'm seeing a sign of something going on in my plant, it's effectively something happening in the biology.
Yep.
So with that train of thought, I mean, what kind of corrective steps would I be looking at trying to take in a situation?
Sure. It's so easy, and it feels kind of silly, to just like the best thing you can do is just add biology, just throw biology at it, and in whatever fashion is convenient, and depending on the severity of your situation. Like I have been talking with this gentleman in Costa Rica. We've been, flirting around with the idea of getting something going down there, and so, and a lot of times I have to build confidence with potential clients or potential partners, or sharecroppers or whatever, and that usually comes in the form of just me kind of giving little tidbits of information to help them along, and not be just 100% withholding. And so, I helped him. He had some root feeding nematodes and some some dampening off and some stuff going on, and I just explained to him, man, but once again, it's just biology. So get some earthworm castings, make an extract, water it in, hit it hard. You're not going to burn your shit, and then 2 weeks later he calls me, he's like, oh my God, dude, it worked. Will you send me your company bio and and blah 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 blah, so I can that's really as simple as it gets. And so depending on your situation, you have to do a little bit of analysis. So I heard what he was working with. He was working in a cocoa medium and it was soggy at the bottom. So we knew what he had to address, because if you're just going to throw biology at it, that's fine too, but you're better off kind of doing a little investigative work and figuring out what's causing this particular issue. So if you have an anaerobic pocket in your bed, and honestly, none of these things have ever happened to me in my situation, but this is what I would do were it to come up. Like if I had a spot in my bed that was underproducing, or a plant was dying in one spot or whatever, now I would look at the soil under the microscope and see if I could find anaerobes or some kind of indicator there. But previous to the soil food web education, I would have just thrown biology at it, in the form of top dressing, just some earthworm castings. If it was a mild thing that I just felt like I needed a minor correction, that's what I would do. If it was a more serious situation, I would make it into an extract and extract that biology and do multiple successive extracts. So in that same 5-gallon bucket, you've done like 4 or 5 different batches of the earthworm casting. So you've got a very concentrate liquid extraction of biology to really hit it hard.
So
and that's it.
why would where would like a biostimulant fall in line there? So like say I see something going on with my plant and I'm on like a seaweed or something to try to stimulate biology. A lot of people use carbohydrates like molasses. I'm just kind of curious of why that was different than you know what I mean? You just went right for worm casting and biology, but I'm just thinking like feeding the biology that's there. Is that a danger at that point? Is there something?
No, I mean, that's a really good question, and I honestly don't have enough experience or never even looked into like sugar, like feeding sugar to accelerate biology. I don't know so I wouldn't do it because I don't understand what that would do. If we had anaerobes, would that be a food source for anaerobes as well? Are they opportunistic in that sense? Like, could I be exacerbating a potential problem with that? So if I'm doing an extract of known material that I know has full of good biology, that's to me the safest bet. I'm really huge at mitigating variables. If I can, and I'm just kind of like that in my mind, I work that way. I'm like a very like hyper cautious, and I like to try to see around corners. And if I see a way to eliminate potential variables, I'll do that. And a lot of times a potential negative variable is just your lack of understanding. And so for me, that would be my lack of understanding of how sugar or concentrated sugars or concentrated carbohydrates work at a deeper level. I certainly understand that it can cause a biology bloom. It's a food source, but I'm not at the level of knowledge yet where I fully understand how the anaerobes interact with that. And so I'm not comfortable kind of giving advice in regards to that or doing it in my own garden. So I try to stay within the levels of my understanding, and that's why I recommend the earthworm casting, extract or something like that.
No, I think that's beautiful because it definitely shows the respect you have to what actually can happen. Excuse me, what can happen through an ecosystem. I mean, like you dump a bunch of coin onto an ecosystem, that,
right?
In a financial sense, and it kind of goes crazy too. So
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely right. And so I want to manage the party, and not like throw alcohol to the flame. But and I may like this may spark a conversation with some of my colleagues where I actually like kind of go down this rabbit hole, and I may learn something entirely different about it, and you know, uh, it be something that I think is a practical approach. But up to this point, it's not been something that anybody that I've I look up to as a mentor or have anything has said, hey, do a sugar drench. I just haven't heard that yet. I've heard that from people who are who read it online. And actually the guy from Costa Rica he was talking about that's kind of something that they read, that it would help, boost the biology to a point where it would outcompete the nematodes, but it wasn't working for him. And what did work was the earthworm casting extract. And so that, little things like that to me is, I've immediately putting the sugar in kind of this kind of compartment in my brain as, I don't, I'm not quite sure about that, because I do have one guy who's tried it and it wasn't working.
Yeah.
Like he was still having the problems. And then, 2 weeks later, he calls me or sends me messages like, oh man, thank you. It was what the doctor ordered. So,
No.
once again, it's hard to go wrong with fresh, aerobic biology.
And where would you put like a cold compost, or not a cold manure? So like a rabbit or alpaca,
Oh, sure.
can be used along that, but isn't that applying biology as well? I mean, you're
Yep.
basically.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I would have no problem with a direct kind of like a top dressing of rabbit manure, or making an extract out of it. I don't like to use tea because a lot of times that's kind of implied that you're brewing and adding a food source and multiplying the biology. I'm I'm more of a fan of the extract, which is just separating the biology from the organic matter, much like making ice hash. You're really there's just a separation that's taking place, and then that gets watered into the root zone. If I need to do a foliar application, that's when I'll do a tea. And the tea, the reason why is that during that multiplication process, when you're actually brewing the tea and creating more biology than was there when you did your extract, right? Because basically a tea is an extract that you add food to, and then oxygen, and then they just start multiplying like crazy in there. And so that multiplication process creates all the glues, creates these very sticky glues. And this was one of the things that I couldn't visualize until I took the course too, the Soil Food Web course, was that when you make that tea, the glue is so strong that if you watered it in, it's going to get stuck in that top layer. Like it's just going to like glue together, and then eventually they'll work its way down, but it's not, you're not getting the same infiltration than you were if you just had free floating biology that wasn't all coated like a chia seed. I'd like to think of I don't know if you've ever put chia seeds in water, but they get this really sticky, gluey coating around them, right? Like almost instantaneously, and they're very sticky. So I like to think of, like wet chia seeds as what is happening with your biology when you make a tea. And so that's appropriate as a foliar application, because when you spray that tea and it hits the bottom of the leaf surface, the water droplet that comes off does no longer carries the biology, because the biology sticks like a sticker to the leaf. So it just, the water hits it, and then the water drops off. And previous, I would have thought, oh, there's biology dripping off with the water, but no, sure as shit, that's not what's happening. The biology is actually sticking to the surface of the leaf, and then the water that comes down doesn't have any. Or if the biology is like dripping down the leaf, it's just leaving a trail of biology, like a slug, a microscopic trail. And then that biology will then populate the surface of the leaf, and literally you're building a castle wall on your leaf surface that's invisible. But when spores or insects land on it, they're not even touching your plant. they're walking along on a surface of biology that's just ready to consume, and so you're literally applying like a castle wall. So the tea, when you brew a tea, it's for a foliar application, or it should be. The extract is the best thing for going into the soil, because then you're getting a deeper penetration, and less. You're eliminating another variable. Once again, it's that awareness of variables, and the brewing of the tea itself is a pretty significant variable for anaerobes. If you brewed too long, or you had too much of a food source in there, and the party exploded in there, and you've got so much growth that it robbed all the oxygen. Literally, the reproduction will take all the oxygen out of the water.
Even though you're pumping oxygen into.
Even though you're pumping, right? It's just that it's this. They'll use up all the oxygen, and then next thing you know, ciliates will show up, and you'll start all your anaerobes, your facultative anaerobes, and then your true anaerobes will start showing up. And so, the brewed teas are your number one source of anaerobes, especially for people who are doing like these 36-hour brews and all these other deals, and not to go off on a tangent, but because I get this question a lot too about anaerobic brews, like the JDAM and the other, like KNF, but JDAM specifically, where you're literally just throwing plant matter into the water and just letting it sit in a sealed container with an airlock for 7 days. It smells like a zoo when you open it. Full of biology, full of anaerobic biology and aerobes. So what I like to say is that they're all good. It's just that with the anaerobic ferments, there's potential for human pathogens, and so the E. coli and all the other kind of like human pathogens that could be in that material is once again a variable that like I don't want to deal with. I would much rather have my hands in a compost extract or a compost tea that if I ingested it, it would be good for me, than one that's going to give me the shits or worse. So it's little things like that I have nothing bad to say about JDAM practices, nothing bad to say about KNF. Myself personally, I don't want to work with anaerobic stuff. I would rather work with aerobic stuff, things that are not going to cause a potential for harm. And I think there's going to be a lot of KNF guys that are like, oh, if you do it right, you're not, and I get it. I'm not shitting on KNF
Right.
or JDAM at all. I love these guys. I love the work they do. I've even done some fermented plant juice. I think it's valuable. I am not opposed to the concept at all whatsoever. It's just that for my practices, I want to focus on strictly aerobic material, and once again, just because of the variables.
Yeah. Josh, why would you want to do an extract versus just applying that material right to the top of the soil and watering it in?
Sure, that's a great question. The extract, when I say extract, I'm referring to kind of like a concentrated extract. So kind of what I was describing before. So I'll just kind of briefly describe my process. So if I'm doing a small extract for say one bed or so, like my home grow, I'll grab a 5 or 10 gallon bucket of water, and then I'll use a bubble, like a compost tea bag, a 240 micron or something, and then I'll fill it with about a pound of whatever material, whether it's biocomplete compost or earthworm castings, and then I'll put that in the water and kind of dunk it, lightly massage it, and just, it's a real gentle agitation. I'll do that for about 30 seconds to a minute. Then I'll take that material out, put it back into the compost pile, or put it somewhere to be composted, and then grab another fresh pound. And so now it's like putting 2 tea bags in your tea.
Yep.
Right. So it's going to be extra strong. So now it would be like adding the biology of 10 pounds or 5 pounds of material into that water. So every time I do that, it gets more concentrated, more concentrated, more concentrated. So then what you're watering in is basically like a concentrated extract. You know, you're just continually adding to it
without having to put so much
yeah,
material
100%.
at the top of the
And
soil.
it penetrates quicker, right? So I think there's a quicker action. So that was one of the things that I was mentioning earlier. So if somebody is, you know, really in a tough spot and they're in kind of a crisis mode, then I would recommend a very strong compost extract, and watered in. You know, if you see something coming on the horizon, a plant looks kind of funky and your gut's telling you something's weird going on there, then top dress a little earthworm castings and see what happens over the course of the next week or something. So a top dress, single strength top dress is more of like a preventative or just to kind of, you know, feel things out. The extract would be, you know, if you want immediate action and you know, you've got to remedy something lickety split.
No, and I love that, man, especially like trying to, you know, look at a plant, say, you know, magnesium, for example, is a common one that's applied, you know, like
Yeah.
Epsom salts. And it's like, even if you're seeing some sort of a sign of a magnesium deficiency, you're still going back to biology.
Right.
And it's not even about the NPK that's in the worm castings, because I've seen some bags worm castings that'll actually have these NPKs or and I think they have to do that
Yep.
to get it on the shelf, but it's not about that at all. And
Right.
that's the interesting part, you know?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, you can't mention biology for fertility at all, or else your product to get pulled from the shelf. So you have to, if I'm remembering it correctly, it's been a long time. I used to own and operate a couple indoor garden centers, but that was around 07. So it's been a minute, but I seem to remember it being something like they're pretty strict on what you can say the biology is doing.
But isn't that kind of like along the line of Mammoth P? I mean, their biology there is
Yeah, that's once again, that's why like I'm not sure what the rules are with that. You know, I'm not sure if they can call that a fertilizer per se, you know, or if they're calling it something else and they don't have to have NPK on there. Um, it's interesting. It's interesting politics when you get into that kind of Department of Ag
well,
zone.
it is too, because like, you know, most of us, and I'm included in this, and listeners too, like most of us, if we think about biology for our plants, we're thinking about a bug in a jug. We're thinking, you know, photosynthesis plus. We're thinking
Right.
EM1, or you know, these branded things that we can get, and it's just you're talking, hey man, we got these earthworm casting, but
Yeah.
my point there is that a lot of that biology is actually in that earthworm casting, and we don't have the CFU counts on it or whatever, but
Right.
just trusting that system is kind of back to where you're at with that, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely there. You know, if you took a sample of a concentrated earthworm casting extract, or just, you know, a sample of straight earthworm castings, it will be evident that it's a rich and wealthy source of microbial life. You know, it's just it's one of nature's like best gifts in my honest opinion. And I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things that you know, any organic cultivator, and myself included, like I need to up my game and I need to implement, you know, a vermicomposting station at all of my facilities for that very reason. You know, unless the biocomplete composting is on point, because ultimately it's about biology, and if it whatever it takes to get the biology into your ground or your soil, your beds, then I'm all for it. I just know in my mind, vermicomposting is kind of the easiest way to achieve that.
Yep. No, I understand. Josh, we're coming up on an hour. I did have one more question, but I just want to
Sure.
check, man, if you're doing all right, and or
Yeah,
what.
no, I'm good. Yep. I
Um,
could go another 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, so my question actually kind of was one along the lines of earlier before we went live, but so one of the issues I ran into when I got to my third cycle is my rice hulls disappeared. I started getting compaction issues. So that's when I really started looking at soil structure. And in my mind's eye, I'm thinking that, you know, I really need to engineer this soil so that I can go multiple cycles with it, you know, to make sure I have the aeration that's going to last and such things. When you started, you kind of went, I mean, Tad puts together kind of a Coots mix soil, and that's what a lot of people use out there. Like, how different would you look at that structure versus, like, I mean, is that a good enough structure to kind of go multiple cycles, and where would you look for improvement possibly in something like that? But
well, that's a good question, and I think I would just address that as like I'm still kind of in the observation phase when it comes to that. So I'm about 4 years into the beds that I have now, with the Keep It Simple stuff here, and I've never added any new aeration or, you know, pumice or new rice hulls or nothing. It definitely, the structure has definitely changed. To a certain degree, but I can't, in hindsight, it would have been a really smart thing to do to pull, kind of a 1 gallon Ziploc bag of the soil the day I put it in there, because I would really love to look at it now, the physical properties of that soil compared to the soil that's in the bed now. Um, you know, it would be an interesting thing to try to quantify, like how much of the soil in my beds now is new organic matter from the successive, companion planting and cover crops and everything going on in there. Um, but once again, I'm going to sound kind of like a broken record. But your biology in appropriate levels will handle your aeration for you, and that's where I'm taking the Fukuoka approach, and I'm just kind of trusting the information and knowledge that I downloaded, in regards to the importance, of what microbes will do to compaction layers in your soil, and just how easily they can chew through those layers that in agricultural fields are literally cement, like harder than cement. I've been in some fields in the last year that you have to kind of till one time so you can get the biology in there, for a rapid planting. Ideally, you just get the biology on there and then wait a year and come back, and just start managing it with companion plants, and then the compaction will kind of go away. But what makes the compaction go away is the biology. They just get to it. So in my beds, does the soil feel more clayey when I pick it up and touch it now? Yeah, it does. And do I get deep, rich chocolate brown dark streaks in my hand that I have to go scrub off because there's so much humic in there? Yeah, I do, but I'm not necessarily bugged out by that, because what I'm observing is healthy plants. What I'm observing is 2 or 3 dozen companion plant species and my cash crop all doing well. So I'm not necessarily going to look for potential things that are wrong if I'm not seeing it. So do I have a more compact soil, or did the structure of my soil change from the way it was 4 years ago? Sure, definitely. Am I worried about it?
the amount of
No.
roots you got going through there with all those companion plants, that
Sure.
would actually
Yeah.
be a huge aeration part of it.
Yep, absolutely. And once again, that's just that's the benefit of having the companion plants interacting with the soil as opposed to just a mulch layer or whatever.
Awesome, man. Well, Josh, one thing I'm just curious, is there a question that you were hoping I would ask that I did not ask?
Oh no, that's a good question, and I don't think so, man. I feel like we did a really good job covering, cogent, important topics, and I think it was good, man. It was a good, productive discussion. I feel good
Yeah,
about it.
dude. No, I definitely, man, this has been amazing for me. You've been somebody I've looked up to for a long time, followed you through a lot of the changes and different things you've been doing. And it's
Sure.
awesome that you share that journey with us too. So from somebody that's following your Instagram and all that, I love seeing those pictures, man, and this coolest shit what you're
Awesome.
doing. So
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I appreciate the support and the encouragement.
yeah, and I'll give you a minute to if you wanted to shout something out, or I don't know if there's a charity you want somebody to support, or that upcoming talk Brian's got going on. But otherwise,
Yeah, I mean, I would say just check out Brian's Instagram 303 because organic cannabis or something. I'm so terrible, and he's got the thing going on the 15th. um I'm going to be talking about CBD and kind of hemp production and sharing my experience in the industry, not necessarily as an authority per se, but just as someone who has an experience to share and willing to do that. So I think there's some other, obviously the panel is really heavily loaded. There's Kevin Jodrey, Chip Osborne, Dr. Lane's going to be speaking, Josh and Kelly from Dragonfly Earth Medicine, Lighton is speaking as well. So I
yeah,
think it's going to be action packed. It's happening the 14th or 15th or something like that. I just encourage you guys to go check out 303. I think it's 303 Organic Cannabis.
I think you're right. Yes,
Yeah. So check his stuff out, and you could probably scroll through my Instagram. I'm going to be reposting the information from time to time over the course of the next couple weeks. So if you just pay attention on my Instagram, you'll see what's up with that. But that's coming up on the 15th. And then I've got some big kind of overseas projects that are going on. And I'm kind of waiting for clearance to talk about those. But when I'm available to talk about them, I can't wait. It's something like 500,000 acres over 2
holy
countries. Big, a big UN agroforestry project, and bringing in the Soil Food Web team. So really excited to share that experience as we move forward on that. But we're just starting to piece that together, and we've been working on it for about, now I say we, but they've been working on it there for about a year. We went and met with them a year ago, so it's been a thing that's in the works. But a absolutely gigantic project.
it's awesome, man. I'm excited.
500,000 acres, about 30% is going to be hemp in various forms, so fiber, CBD, seed hemp, and that kind of stuff. So it's going to be diversified, no monocrops at all whatsoever, all like agroforestry principles, and handling all the biology of fertility through biology. So
That'll be
stay tuned
great.
for that. Yeah.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
You just say 500,000 acres, and just roughly off the top of my head, I was talking with some hemp farmers, like roughly they'll plant about 1,800 plants per acre if they're doing
Yeah.
like row hemp like that.
Mhm.
And that just
Yeah.
blew my freaking mind. 500,000 times 1,800, like how
Oh
many
yeah.
plants that would be. Like,
Yeah. And I think our densities are going to be higher than 1,800 even,
yeah.
because of our specific climate and region. So we might be looking more at like 3,000 to 4,000 per acre.
Wow. That's awesome to see,
Yeah.
man. That'd be so
Yeah,
amazing.
it's gonna be a trip. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I'll share as much as I can as we move forward on that. I also have a thing going on in Ohio with one of my old Marine brothers. We've got a pretty cool project in the works, and as we move forward with that, I'm gonna be sharing a lot of that because that's just me and his baby, and there's no intellectual property or non-disclosures or anything. So I'll be able to be wide open with that project, and we actually might be moving to Ohio because of it. So
No shit,
um,
man. I'm not too
yeah,
far from
yeah,
there.
the Akron area.
That'd be cool.
Yeah,
Well, Josh, I'll let you jump out, man, and I'm gonna
cool, brother.
with the live chat once you're out, and I definitely appreciate your time, man.
Oh man, it was an absolute pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks,
All
man.
right, be good, man.
Yeah, guys, that's I'm blown away still, man. I've been a kind of a fanboy of Josh's for a long time, so I was definitely fangirling this whole episode. Hope you guys enjoyed in chat. I really didn't get a chance to follow along. I was focusing on the conversation there. So I hope everybody enjoyed. Everybody learned something, took some information away. I hope you can pass it along to somebody else in your life and other gardeners that are trying to go along, and we can start spreading the word a little bit more and getting everybody growing organically. So we will, we're probably going to fire up the rabbit hole after this. I hope some of the people in chat want to jump on. Maybe we can continue the conversation there a little more. I hope everybody will follow us there. But I got to take a leak, so